Present.
Brian Holmes. Is Brian there? Oh, yes, you are.
Here, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
That.
Great. I think, did Brad just jump off? Not seeing him anymore.
I don't know if he's disconnected somehow or.
Just keep going. Gabrielle Lamano.
Here.
Gerard Ahern.
Present.
And Liz Hutchins.
Here.
Yeah, I'm sure Brad will rejoin. Okay, so for people who aren't familiar with the process, we always start with the reading of the public hearing notice. So in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 11, notice is hereby given that the Bolton Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. via Zoom communications to hear and act upon the application of Christopher and Margaret Bashera. The applicant seeks a variance to construct a 24 by 30 foot pole barn at 50 Golden Run Road in Bolton residential zoning district, identified on Assessors Map 5C as parcel 53. The applicant seeks relief from the 50-foot side yard setback pursuant to section 250-13B of the Code of Town of Bolton. And the public hearing will be conducted via remote. So that, why don't we have the Basheras present their application, and then we'll follow up with questions and go from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris, and this is Margaret.
Hello.
So we've been in Bolton 18 years at that address, and you know, our garage is fairly small. It's about 18 by 20, two-car garage, and we have more vehicles and a lot of equipment for snow removal. You know, I do my own driveway, and the driveway is somewhere around 700 feet. So we want to put up a pole barn, something that's, you know, aesthetically pleasing and very functional to keep a lot of the stuff I can't fit in my current garage, and possibly one or two vehicles to be parked in there. The way our yard is structured, and I sent a copy of the lot plan. We have a long driveway.
Valerie, can you put that plan up?
Yes, sure.
Thanks.
So I had put some markings on the plan so you can see something, you know, get an idea of the topography. The front yard, so the point of the barn is to keep snow equipment in and, you know, possibly keep a vehicle instead of just lining them up on the driveway. We have 5 drivers in our family. So that's quite a few cars. And the front yard is on an elevation of about 8 feet where the septic is. So a large part of the front yard is raised about 8 feet with a decorative stone wall I sort of put around it a long time ago. And so it limits where you can put a structure. In fact, if you look at the front, in front of the dwelling, there may even be only one spot that we figured out that you can put a dwelling. I do have a potting shed there. It's a small potting shed, it's 8 by 12. Putting a larger structure there, I'm not entirely sure would satisfy the 50-foot rule. So if you see on the lot plan, I wrote raised plateau. I wrote the location that we're proposing of the barn. And you can see right in front of the barn, there is a turnaround that's about 26 by 40 where cars turn around. So it would make sense to put it at the end of that turnaround, both for snow removal and, you know, to park vehicles. You can see that raised plateau moving further away. I mean, you're hitting an 8 to 9 foot hillside. That's pretty steep. you would have to push it back towards the east and to the south. And like I said, you may or may not have a location that satisfies the 50-foot rule. If I were to do that, and assuming that would be the one viable spot, I mean, there's obviously a lot of problems you could probably see from that. Number one, it would require a surface, a road essentially, or more driveway that'd be about 120 feet from that turnaround, plus an area for cars to turn around to get into the pole barn. So it involves building 120 feet approximately of sort of this impervious surface. It involves taking down a few oaks. One of them has a 2-foot wide trunk. So it involves major tree removal. It does, you know, I guess a smaller thing is that it does make my job of clearing out my driveway, you know, it really adds to the plate of 700 feet of driveway, the turnaround, and now you're talking about an extra 120 feet to put the barn in that one location. I'd also have to do a formal survey to make sure I could fit it in. The potting shed fits in there fine, but when you're talking about a much larger structure, I'd have to pay for a lot survey, and I would have to get rid of that potting shed and my vegetable garden and a batting cage, which I built for the kids, and some decorative stone walls that I built. So it really is, you know, taking away many things that we have there that I wouldn't want to get rid of. I don't want to sort of fill in the vegetable garden and get rid of the potting shed. And I really don't know if I move those where they would go, because you're in the same situation. That potting shed needs to be 50 feet from each lot line. So you can see it's fairly complicated to try to put it in the one possible place that would satisfy the zoning law. I talked to our neighbor Scott in front of me, and he's completely on board. He's the one that would even see the structure. All the other abutters, they wouldn't have direct visual view of it, but it's going to be, you know, an aesthetically pleasing structure. It's going to be with Circle B barns out of Lancaster. It's going to be about 30 feet from his lot line. At the lot line, there's a big stretch of woods and there's a berm. So you can't even really see his house fully. It's sort of a hillside with woods on it. So even just standing in that spot, you really don't even see a full view of his house. So in terms of privacy concerns, I mean, he doesn't have any, but I'm just saying from an objective point of view, it's quite a ways from his home, and it's obscured by woods and that berm. It's probably about 100, at least 100 feet, maybe more from his house. So it's not like we're putting a structure, you know, 30 feet from our lot line and our neighbors have something right there. And, you know, I mean, that's sort of the gist of it. You know, everything's expensive nowadays, building materials, contractors, and you're really talking about, if I don't get the variance, and I'm not here to do a sob story, but if I don't get the variance, we may not be able to do the project, either because the formal survey doesn't show a spot for the project, or, I mean, you're talking about a formal survey, 120 feet of driveway, the excavation costs, a lot of electric costs to make it that far away. It becomes less functional. You know, putting cars kind of tucked next to the woods back there is a little odd. It probably would work, but again, it's a lot of expense. It's tree removal, and it's moving many things that occupy that space that took us a while to build or to put up. So I mean that's sort of the gist of it.
What's the length of, like, so is the potting shed, or you refer to, is that just a shed that's like mounted, or is there an actual structure into the ground, or how is that? What is that like?
The potting shed you're talking about?
Right. Is that just on like a concrete pad, or is that on like a?
Yeah, no, it's not on any concrete. It's on packed stone with just some blocks.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then how long what's the dimensions of, say, your decorative rock wall? I mean, is it a large
Yeah, so, I have a garden wall around my garden with rocks. I have a front loader, a John Deere front loader. So I mean, you see these rocks are 300, 400, 500 pounds that I was able to move there. So it's a big wall.
So
around
dimension wise,
part
is
of
it feet? Is it multiple feet of wall? Or what is the? Like,
Yeah, I still have 3 sides of it up. It's probably 100 feet if you do that. And I have a decorative stone planter that I built with plantings. That's probably, again, very large stones. That's probably at least 12 feet wide. Big circular structure. And then there's a batting cage there that's 50 feet long, which is on packed gravel that I built a few years ago when my college kids were still playing high school sports.
All right.
And there's a 2-foot oak tree. It's quite a large tree that I left there quite a while ago. Again, because of the looks. It's a solitary oak that sort of spreads out, and that would have to, I'm told that would have to go.
Okay. You referenced a butter that has no problem with the location of the proposed pole barn. Do you, is there any communication from that abutter, a letter or anything like that?
No, I texted him and basically called him and told him about the meeting, but he just, Scott basically just said, I'm absolutely fine with that. Yep, no problem. I didn't ask him to write me a letter or anything like that.
Yeah. How about the pole barn? Do you have any specifications for that? Any type of drawings that you've had done so that we would have an idea of what it looks like? And
yeah, I can show you a picture of an identical structure that the same company built on Still River Road. This might be a little tough, and I know there's glare, but I mean, I have it on my phone here. I don't know if this works, but it is, people can see that. It's 24 by 30. It has a cupola. It's got sliding front doors. I mean, it's your typical New England barn. I mean, if you know, I'm sure you know Bolton, the barn at the bottom of the hill of Golden Run and Sugar, that red barn is going to be very similar. It was built by a different company, I believe, but it's going to look like this, basically, I mean, you've seen these Circle B's, I think, built 3 barns on Golden Run Road. I've asked them to draw plans, but frankly, I'm not going to move forward and have, I've paid $1,200 to have them start do drawings, but I'm not going to really do much more until I get this variance. If I don't get the variance, I don't know that I'm moving forward, and I think that money will be gone.
yeah, I mean, so with regard to just the process, oftentimes if we're trying to permit something or allow something to be built where it's sort of in the future, people don't have a full idea of what's going to be there. They think it's going to be a barn. We try to, if we were to condition it on, in substantial conformity with what we're have in front of us, because we could permit, something, and then you could do something totally different. We wouldn't have had any idea of what you're going to do other than a barn, So, yeah, we're probably all familiar with either circle barn or things, but these are just questions we normally would ask and see.
Yeah. And actually, this is the exact barn. I mean, it probably won't be that color, not that that matters at all, but that will be, I wanted them to basically kind of copy the structure. So they're drawing out plans. It's going to look like that. I think we all know the company. Like I said, they have numerous barns. So that's who I signed with and gave a deposit to. But I think we're not, everything's sort of on hold. There's a lot of tree work that would need to be done. If I don't do this, I mean, so I don't think we're moving forward with them until we really kind of square this away.
Okay.
It will be with them, though. I do have a contract.
You mentioned also this, what was the size of that? Sorry.
24 by 30,
Okay.
24 wide, 30 deep. With these things, they usually go 24 wide with them. You can do 22 wide, but that's tough if you're using it for a vehicle. They're usually 24 wide or wider.
And that's one story, was it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a loft, there's stairs to storage space in a loft. It'll have 4 windows on each side, a cupola, you know, unfinished on the inside. I mean, this is not living space. This is completely unfinished. This is a barn. There's no animals. You know, there's going to be, you know, my garage is 18 by 20. You can probably picture, you know, 2 larger vehicles in there. They barely fit, and everything sort of is laid around where we can find storage for it. So in terms of the property value, you know, I'm sort of 18 years in here. I'm looking towards, you know, one day not being in Bolton. I certainly wouldn't want to build anything that would hamper any resale value. In fact, increase the resale value. We're going to be empty nesters before too long, and you know what we put there is not going to be something, you know, makeshift, or obviously, you know, it's gonna hopefully add to the value.
Right.
So if you haven't had formal drawings done, which is what I'm kind of understanding, how do you know that it's going to be 30 feet from your line, your property line? How are you guesstimating that?
So Circle B came out. We paid them. They're in the process of doing that. He says you're in the pile. So, you know, I think with construction and labor, things are frankly a bit dicey to get things done and to get labor done. So it's hurry up and wait. You're in the pile. They said we'd like to have them done for you, but to be honest, I haven't heard from them. So I don't know when. I mean, we're preparing to be pretty patient with the whole process here. They even told us with contractors like electricians to be very patient. But they came out for a site visit. We had a 2-hour meeting with them at their facility, and they came out here and did a complete site visit. So they're ready to go. They know what they need to do. They just need to know where so they can adapt. And I told them, I'm not sure there's a second where. We'd have to put that on hold. And again, you know, pay for a formal survey and see if there was a second where.
Personally, I would like to at least have some type of rendition versus just a picture on the phone that we could have with the application, so we could, if we were to motion to approve the variance, that we would have an idea of, you know, some type of conformity that what we're approving. But also, I think in the past, you know, in any application where we're potentially going to permit closer to someone's lot line than the zoning bylaws, we do like to have positive confirmation from that abutter that they're have no concern with that. So I would personally like to be able to get a letter or some communication from the abutter formally asserting their concurrence with the process and with the proposed structure at a certain location from their property line.
We were under the understanding the abutter did receive confirmation of this meeting. I mean, we certainly, we have talked to him, but we're under the understanding that he would have an opportunity if he objected. He received communication on the entire process, correct?
That's fine. People receive the legal notices, but you know, we've had situations in the past where, you know, silence is not necessarily an indication of concurrence, and you know, they could be out of pocket, they could change their mind. So we, you know, certainly it's something that helps us with our process to have that documentation.
I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be, out of turn or anything, but I can get him on the phone. I think folks are busy. I can ask him to write a letter, and I don't know his timetable of giving one. To be honest, I feel a little forward. I didn't know that would be, required, but I can get him on the phone and he can give you a verbal. I mean, we had we're neighbors. We had a conversation. I mean,
I think the reason I brought that up is we would have, had we known that that was a requirement from the board, that would have been different. We understood that the requirement was just to notify, and if they raised an objection. So I guess we're a little taken back that we're now required to get approval in writing as opposed to the process that we thought was in place. That's all.
Well,
they have an opportunity to attend the meeting. They, there's a process that's published on this. And it doesn't say, get a letter from the abutter, but again, that's fine to do. I don't know.
We can ask them. Yeah.
That's all I can do is ask. I mean, people, I'm sure have other things to do besides write me a letter.
well,
And I can,
we can ask,
contact them.
we'll open it up to the rest of the board to have their opinion on this as well. But it certainly is something that has been routine in many applications. So I don't want to.
Yeah, I would say in my experience with any of these variances that we've given, whether it was for, a barn, a shed, even sometimes like a farmer's porch, in the, I guess, 4 or 5 years I've been on the board, people have always come with a letter just stating that, for the person for the abutters, they're coming with a letter saying, yeah, we're fine with this. And they also typically are showing plans with dimensions, and a site plan, just so that we can, because we have to make approvals based on that plan and based on distances. And, just to say it's 30 feet, like we usually have to say, give a variance per the plan that was submitted, so that when the variance goes back, it's per that plan.
Right. So,
Hello, this doesn't necessarily,
Brad?
yeah, does this
Okay.
have to be decided tonight?
No,
We could do it the next meeting if you want to get the evidence together of, you could take a picture of an existing barn that represents it or get measured drawings from the
I
developer.
have a picture. I just wish I knew this before the meeting. I would have gladly asked him for a letter and sort of push the issue for plans, but I read the application and it doesn't mention that. I mean, to put it off another month, I suppose is fine.
Well,
but
we're
there's
meeting
a little
next
bit of-
week, so it's not
We don't
another
always-
month.
Doesn't mean we'll put it off another month. It's just that we need, it's, so you have some good information in your application about the process or about what you want to do. But for us to, make a decision, it happens with a lot of applications. We may have information provided to us, but to actually make a valid decision that we think will be, held up if it was appealed on appeal, we have to think about our decision in the documentation process, and then these are things that come up. So and as Brad said, we do have another hearing next week. So to the extent we had a motion tonight to either continue it for till we had these conditional items, then that would happen, and you'd get that, and then next week we'd have another hearing, and go from there. But this is a normal process. It's not like we're trying to make you do something outside the normal course of business with the zoning board.
I'm not sure that we can continue to next week because I think we need more notification, public notification than that, don't we?
Not to continue,
There's
Okay.
been public notification.
right? Once it's an open hearing, I think we can continue, Is that correct, Valerie?
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
right. Mhm. So,
Yeah, we could open up our hearing next week before we get into 580, just, deal with what we have here, very quickly, I would think.
right.
So I'll do my best to get a letter from the neighbor and to get those plans. I mean, I'm somewhat constrained on,
They could email Valerie town planner. If it's easier than someone typing up a letter or,
I'm sure, yeah.
processing a letter. So some communication that, confirms with some type of, accuracy to where they believe that this structure is going to be placed with regard to their lot line, so that, for all we know, now I'm not saying this case, we've had a situation, say in the past, we had an abutter that was going to do that, but that abutter was selling their home, before the process was ending. So a new abutter was going to come in potentially with a barn or a shed almost on their property line. So, they had, the applicant had good faith that yes, they had spoken to their abutter. That abutter was leaving town within a week, and it wasn't going to be the same situation. So, so we want to know that they know, yes, it's going to be within, so many feet of my property line and in an approximate area, so that, let's say you don't have a specifics about where it's going to be sited yet. So we want to have some type of idea of what we're approving, where we're approving it.
I don't know about other members, but I don't mind moving forward without a plan, as long as I know the dimensions of the building, the footprint of the building, and the general location, which we know, but maybe more specifically to say that, under no circumstances can it be closer than 30 feet from the property line.
Mm-hmm.
To me, with all that, we have enough, but that, other people may want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, and I'm not looking at necessarily full plans, but if they had just a rendition or a picture, some that we sort of can at least have with the record that this is what it should look like when it's actually built, and this is where it should be when it's actually built, if we're going to approve something like that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Andy. I agree with your statement too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so with that, do we have a motion to continue then to, I guess it's going to be January 18th at our next hearing?
I would make a motion, we continue till next week, the 19th. That's the date, I
18th.
believe. Yeah.
18th.
The first item on the agenda, whatever time we are meeting, I think it's 6:30, but I'm not sure.
So Brad, just be sure, Valerie, is that the 18th or 19th is our next hearing?
It would be the 18th at 6
Oh,
p.m.
it's the 18th, sorry about that.
So continue to 18th at 6 p.m. Okay, so we need to designate one of our one of our associates as a voting member on this, correct, Valerie?
It is up to the applicant's discretion. I mean, you can have 4 members voting. You would need 3 as an affirmative. So if you want that extra, the extra member just to increase your odds,
Usually better to have a little cushion in case somebody is opposed, but that's up to the
Sure, yeah,
applicant.
we'll do that, sure.
So with that, why don't we we'll designate Liz Hutchins as a voting member on this one, and that way we'll have those will be the members that will vote next week at the once we continue hearing.
So just to be clear, if, I'll go to Circle B, and some sort of drawing they can produce in 1 week that just has sort of dimensions would be adequate.
Yeah, or rendition, just however, they may already have a catalog that just has a picture of it with, says,
Okay.
that's, right.
What also might be helpful is like photographs of what it looks like now, just so we can kind of see from your property's perspective, like what it looks like and what the yard currently looks like. I did look at it in Google Maps, but it's kind of a little bit hard to see. So pictures from the ground might be helpful as well.
Okay.
Where would I get those pictures in that rendering? Just send them to Valerie on her email,
Yeah.
or?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And I'll use your email for Scott to sort of just give a letter that he knows where it's going to be placed and that he has no objections.
Sure, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so Brad, you motion to continue hearing to January 18th at 6 PM. So do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Valerie, can you roll call that?
My volume working?
Now it is.
Now it is, okay. Those in favor, Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes,
and Elizabeth Hutchins.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll continue that till next week. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So why don't we jump right into the next one? We got, it looks like most, well, I can't tell most people, but the applicant's there. It looks like peer review's there. So board's here. So you want to bring up that meeting notice, Valerie?
Sure.
You have to do a separate roll call, even though.
No, it's okay. I mean, we don't, you can read the public notice. It's once the public hearing's opened, we don't, it's not required. But let me find it.
Well, no, we want, so if we don't have to read the public, at least we'll just say this is the continuation.
Yeah.
Mallard Lane, active adult living community, which is proposed off of South Bolton Road, map 2C, parcel 15-1, and the applicant proposing 11 detached single-family homes on a 4.7 acres of land. So with that, we didn't have a full meeting last time. It had to be continued because we didn't have materials presented to us in time to get either our peer reviewers to review them. So this is the continuation follow-up hearing. So we did receive a whole host of new documentation from the applicant. So why don't we have the applicant take some time, half hour, 45 minutes to, if necessary, to review the revised set plan, the applicant's engineering consultant letter, and the applicant's wetland consultant. Either the applicant take care of it, or if he has their resources there to speak to those, that'd be great. Well, I think you muted, Jim.
Okay, there I am. Sorry about that.
It's
So
okay.
Greg Roy will be chiming in here. He's running a little late from another meeting. It's his firm that we've collaborated with, and he is the engineer of record for the response to Horsley and Whitman's review letter, peer review letter. So if you go in there, I'm sure the board received the letter. It's dated December 16th, 2021. It talks about initial stormwater wetlands peer review. So, it goes point by point about what Dillis and Roy completed on the new documents, everything from the stormwater recalculations to meet the current, to the pipe sizing, the catch basins. Again, they redid the storm event the way the town now likes to do it. That's a new regulation, I guess.
Well, Jim, if he's gonna be here to speak to that, do you want to at least go over the new site plans? Did you present a whole host of?
Yeah, we could do that. I think one of the things, if I could, I don't mean to jump around, but I think what I need to talk about is the stuff he isn't going to talk about, right? So where he's, I'm working with a different environmental person. I'm working with Norse Environmental out of Tingsboro, Mass. So they sent over a letter. I'm sure Valerie shared it with the board. It talked about there was another wetland associated with the project, which is on the what I call the air wing of the development. It's where the land kind of jets out and comes around, looks like an airplane wing. So there's a new B series flagging that was put in there. And Maureen from Norris commented on that it's a small isolated wetland and it doesn't connect anywhere. It's not hydraulically connected. And it was her professional opinion that it was even too small to be a vernal pool. So did you see that letter?
Uh, Yeah, well, yes, we've seen anything that's been submitted. We
Okay.
we read through it, but we haven't had
I mean,
sent us the material.
you know, what Maureen and I plan on doing is what I promised from the beginning of this project is once we solidify after tonight's meeting about where the structures are, the right pipe sizes, once we know where everything is within the project scope, then we were going to file a notice of intent with conservation. One of the things we're going to ask conservation to do, though, is to review it in such a manner where they understand it's a 40B application. Not have us do a notice of intent and then just deny it on local regulations, because obviously that's not the intent of the project.
Mhm.
So that's where we're going to go from after tonight's meeting. Is we're going to get Maureen involved, and Norse Environmental will be submitting a notice of intent, like I promised at the beginning of the project, to the Bolton Conservation Commission, with that one caveat that they please review it as a 40B project. Is there any questions on that?
Well, I believe, Valerie, the Concom had some questions about, and maybe even Joe Piznola from our peer review on the scope of that review. I know Leslie Whitten's letter seemed to be more detailed, and I think that North's letter only addressed a couple items. If my recollection from the quick read, we just got some of those materials today, so.
Does Joe want to comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just noted in my letter that the Horsley Witten letter on the wetlands comments, there were 6 comments, and Maureen's letter from Norse responded to 2 of them. So just pointing out, it didn't seem like she had responded to everything.
Mhm.
I mean, she was talking about the areas being non-jurisdictional, but there is a nuance here in that this board, the zoning board, is taking it has jurisdiction under the local wetlands bylaw. So Jim is correct in that the Conservation Commission, he will apply under the State Wetlands Act to get a notice of to get an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission and under the State Act. But the approval under the local wetlands bylaw is happening here within the comprehensive permit. All local approvals are subsumed into that. So that's why your peer reviewer was looking at some of those issues that may be germane to the project only under the local act. The applicant is allowed to ask for waivers and can ask for a waiver of the local wetland bylaw in its entirety. What I would say is you need input from your wetlands peer reviewer to understand the implications of that. One of the hardest things for this board to do in comparison to what the Conservation Commission does is the Conservation Commission can look at the application of their local bylaw kind of in a vacuum and rule based on that. You have to look at it from the standpoint of the 40B regulations and the underlying presumption that the need for affordable housing outweighs the local concerns. So it's a different bar, but it may or may not impact how you look at and gather information with regard to those local wetland issues. Clear case is the isolated wetland. It is not a state jurisdictional wetland. So under the State Act, the Conservation Commission has no jurisdiction over it. But this board does. And in some instances, 40Bs have proposed to fill locally jurisdictional isolated wetlands under a 40B, and they've been allowed to. And it's the ZBA that allows that to happen. So I don't think that's the case here. I just think it's more about just again, the nuances of the local regulations that Amy Ball is looking at, your wetlands peer reviewer from Horsley Witten. And it may be that Maureen's response is none of that matters because we've asked for the waivers. So I think it just needs to be clarified as to what is the applicant done responding to the wetlands issues raised in the Horsley Wetland. And then if the answer is yes, then you can have you can get further input from Horsley Wetland as to what that means.
Right. Okay.
Can we go over what those 4 items that were not responded to are, just so we clarify that?
I would say that's for the applicant to do. I mean, the applicant's been presented with a letter that had 6 wetlands comments, and he presented a response that has 2 responses. So
What?
Yeah,
I think we
for
need
the-
to. I think the board should hear from Maureen.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah,
that is fine. I will invite Maureen to the next meeting, but what my intent is, and again, from the beginning of time over 4 years ago, was, you know, I was going to try to help out the ZBA by willfully going and getting the conservation on board with the project and asking them for certain waivers and not taking it fully and not, you know, saying it's a 40B project that I'm exempt for everything and I want an overall waiver. That's not my intent. My intent, like I said earlier, is to, you know, firm up with this board, kind of the locations and the infrastructure. Then I can speak intelligently. Maureen and I will go to conservation, ask for certain waivers, only the needed waivers to do the project as we're presenting to the ZBA. That's my whole intent, and that's what I promised. I'm hopeful that I've been before all the boards and commissions in the town of Bolton at this time, at least once. And my goal is by the end of this project, before the ZBA has to make a decision, is I'd love to get support letters or all their concerns together and then forward it to the ZBA. So they have the tools they need to make their decision, even though it's their power to make the decisions, but what all the other boards and commissions think of it, the project in the town.
I disagree, Mr. Chairman. I disagree with that approach. The applicant can't pick and choose where jurisdiction lies.
No,
The jurisdiction on the local bylaw squarely lies with this board. All powers are subsumed. Their power to apply to the Conservation Commission lies solely within the state regulation. You can't say that the Conservation Commission is going to have jurisdiction and grant waivers from their local bylaw because they don't have that jurisdiction.
We need to know.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Maybe I'm wrong, but would the zoning board appreciate that I would do that extra effort? Or if they don't want me to do it, I won't do it. But I was, you know, in the 4 years or 4.5 years I've been working on this project, I've been talking like that. Nobody ever told me until Joe said tonight not to do it. I mean, if you don't want me to do it, I can save the time.
The role of the Conservation Commission with regards to the application of the local bylaw is advisory. So you can go to the Conservation Commission and get their input as to the waivers that you're asking the zoning board to grant.
Right.
And ask them to give their opinion. And if they're in favor of those waivers and they want to render an opinion to the zoning board that's their position, then yes, it helps the zoning board immensely because they don't deal with this on a regular basis the way the Conservation Commission does.
That's why we need to have the list of any waivers, final list of waivers in front of us so that we can also get them to the right boards to say, okay, this is the final, these are the waivers that are being presented to us. For those that aren't in, let's say, the zoning waivers that you would require for, you know, multifamily homes, more homes on one lot, density, all those types of things, we can make a decision on. But all the others that may affect board health, conservation, and whatever, we would need to then finally get approval. Now, if you can help solicit that approval from them, then that helps. But ultimately, as Joe says, all this stuff has to be in front of our board. And you reference back 4 years plus that you've been working on this project. We have to look at it again from since we opened the hearing back in September, I think it was, that's what's been in front of us, not
No,
4 years prior to that.
No, I understand. I think Joe said it a lot more correct than I did. Is I'm just going to these boards and commissions, even like the design review board, and seeking their opinions for the project. So if I misspoke earlier, I like the way Joe said it, is I'm going to go seek opinions to try to help the ZBA out, to show the ZBA what the other boards and commissions of the town of Bolton think, and give their opinion on the project.
As long as we're sure that everything that you're showing them, has to be what's been presented in front of us.
Yeah.
Because that's why we received the whole new set of revised plan set. We should review that as part of sometime tonight when you have your people here to say, yes, let's walk through those, so we sort of have at our disposal, but also for abutters and for others that are online to see what's happening with this project, that they can have access to that material. So
Yeah, I agree. I see that Greg Roy is now here, so he can probably speak on those plans that he worked with us on. So
Just for clarity's sake, can we go over quickly what 4 items were not responded to? I just because I don't understand which items are in dispute right now. So that's is there any way we can pull up Horsley Witten's criticisms and see if we can take a
I
look
think
at that?
Valerie has that letter probably handy that she can bring up on the screen.
So I think this is starting. I just can scroll up a little bit. Starting on number 3, I believe was not responded to. Sorry, my computer's got a little bit of a delay here. So 3 through 6.
3, 4, 5, and 6. And so the ones that were, so this one you said wasn't responded to, dealing with the freshwater wetland.
Yes, I believe it was the first 2 concerns that were dealt with, and then the last 4 were not.
Okay.
But as Joe says, if the reason that there's not a response is because they don't intend to respond, we just need to hear that.
Yeah, I think if I recall reading something with regard to the ANRAD, they said that they provided a notice of an NOI so that they don't believe they need to do an ANRAD. Is that correct? Determination that they had a determination of availability from 4/23/19, so they don't believe it's necessary that they'll have to do a ANRAD filing. But I'm not sure if that's correct or not, at least from the Conservation Commission's perspective.
Right. Our conservation agent had a different opinion on that perhaps the consultant did not factor in the positive, I think it was a positive 2A response. So it was the fact that the boundary that not inclusive of jurisdictional offsets were confirmed. But the jurisdictional offsets were not confirmed, essentially. So I think that's the difference.
So I guess to Brad's point, or to Valerie's point, so there's these 6 items that were brought up by Horsley Witten. 2 of them were addressed, and we would just need to have the applicant respond on the other 4 if there is a response, or if they said that, they don't feel there's a need to respond, then we would know that, just so we have it in the record, so we know what we're dealing with or not, so that it's not something we missed that because people either didn't ask the question or it's just an oversight. So if we get a formal response to all 6 items, that'd be great.
Okay, I will work on that, and my intent is to do it with the conservation through the notice of intent to seek their opinion on the project. And, you know, I'll keep the zoning board up to date on how that is going.
So Brad, we have that letter in the packet, so if you, you know, want to look at that.
Yeah,
outside-
no, I saw the letter. I just was confused as to, you know, what the response would be, if any, and, you know,
Right.
just this clarifies it, so I'm fine.
Okay, thanks. All right, so Jim, why don't you have your consultant walk through the new plans?
Greg, you want to speak on that?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting.
Mhm.
My name is Greg Roy with Dillison Roy Civil Design Group. Appreciate your time this evening, and I'm representing the applicant. I just preface this by saying I was not the PE that stamped these plans, but I do have an understanding of things here. But there may be a few things that Jim will have to fill in the gaps on here, so I do apologize. But I'll give you an overview of things. We, of course, responded to the Horsley and Witten peer review letter by way of a formal response, a letter of our own, which I'm hoping that you have in your packet. And then two other documents of note were a revised plan set. This plan set is dated, having trouble zooming in. The latest date is 12/16. At least that's the one I have here, but that's, excuse me, 12/9/2021 was the date on those plans. And then we also updated the drainage calculations, the stormwater report as well. So there was quite a few comments. I guess I wanted to preface the presentation. Well, first of all, should I share my screen, Valerie, or would you like to do that?
Oh, I'll let you do that.
Okay.
You should be able to now.
Okay. All right, can you all see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, bear with me, I want to get you.
If possible, can you just, to the extent whatever reasonable enlargement, so that
I think I
larger
can.
larger is
Yeah.
better.
I think I can. Hold on, let me see if I can figure out the program here. Is that better?
Oh, yeah, that's better.
Okay. So this is our layout plan. So in general, we did a lot of changes to the plans, but none of them really dramatically changed the look and feel of the development. So there were comments, a lot of comments related to drainage, which tweaked some of the drainage features on the site. But in terms of the overall look and feel of things with the roadway network and the house placements and things like that, nothing, while some smaller changes were made, nothing really dramatic was changed since the iteration of the plans that you had initially. But generally speaking, the roadway comes off of South Bolton Road and ends in a cul-de-sac. The length of the road is just about 600 feet. And we have 11 units clustered around that roadway. As you can see here are those rectangular boxes. I'm going to try and switch plans here. Of course, now I'm not going to be able to do that. Hold on one second. Bear with me. I have to switch plans, and this software package is a little cumbersome. Sorry, folks. My computer's having trouble with this. There we go. So this is this shows a little bit more detail relative to grading and drainage. We have two primary drainage areas on the site. Both of them this area of town has pretty well draining soil, good sand and gravel. And so the basis of our stormwater management system was to utilize that fact and do some underground subsurface infiltration recharge areas. So the rectangular box that you see up here in the front is one of those areas. It's the largest area that we're proposing. That will capture water from a little bit more than half of the road and infiltrate it, as well as the rooftop areas and the overland areas, which will be improved with grass. And then we have another area in the back of the property underneath the cul-de-sac, which will do a similar thing with some, catch basins will route drainage into this area, also capturing the roof runoff in this part of the site as well. We are proposing, let's see if I can get to the utilities plan. We are proposing, of course, a septic system in the back of the property. Our general plan for that would be to do an internal network of internal sewer collection network down to some centralized septic tanks and pump chamber, and pump that back up to the leaching area. This, of course, as I think you started to allude in your opening comments that I was listening in on, will of course require compliance with Title V and any of the local Board of Health regulations that we're not seeking waivers to. But we would design that and permit that after the comprehensive permit process was complete with the Board of Health. I do understand that your board is looking for waivers, and there will be a few relative to the Board of Health process, and we'll need to get you a complete waivers list, not only from Board of Health, but also other boards and other regulations. But I just wanted to say that's an overview of the septic system, and it would comply with state Title V code, of course, because we certainly would, we understand that we need to comply with those regulations. We are proposing wells, one well for each unit. That is one of the areas where we would need where we would need Board of Health relief relative to some of the offset well dimensional requirements that the Bolton Board of Health well regulations have. And again, we will enumerate those in detail in the future, I expect. But there would be a well for each unit. So, this would function like a single family residential house that has a well and a septic system. We are proposing a condominium type of ownership structure, but each unit would have their own well, and they'd be responsible for the operation and maintenance of that well. So that's the plan. Let's see. You can see on this plan the two wetland areas that you were referring to earlier. I will note, as you pointed out, that Norris Environmental is the applicant's wetland consultant on this project. So that's a little bit, I'm not wearing that hat tonight. So we'll have to come back at you with that. As Jim suggested, we'll have to get a representative from Norris Engineering back before your board at a future meeting, and respond more formally to some of the comments that are still outstanding in that process.
Is this area to the top right of is that the area you were talking about, Jim? The airplane
Yeah,
wing or something?
Yeah, if you look at it, it reminds me of an airplane wing, and I always refer to it as the airplane wing. That's the new wetland series too. That the Concom asked me to flag. Actually, Maureen flagged it from Norris.
Okay.
Right. And you can see here, we're not proposing work within the resource areas themselves to the extent that they're considered resource areas, as was suggested. This very well could not be jurisdictional under the state act, but would certainly be jurisdictional under the Bolton wetland bylaw. But either way, we're not proposing any direct alteration to that resource area. We're proposing buffer zone, what's known as buffer zone only work. So that's a little bit easier from a permitting standpoint, easier than if we were to say, as Joe suggested on some previous projects he'd work with, if we were proposing a fill, which we're not proposing at all.
I have a quick question. You have a collection of sewerage down at the holding tanks down at near the road, and then you pump the system back up to the leach field behind the cul-de-sac. Is there any change? I brought this up before, so it's not news, but is there any possibility of backup power? Let's say we lose power for a week. What happens to all that overflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. Two things I think would be built into that plan per code. The very basic code requirement from Title V is that we're required to provide at least 1 day's additional emergency storage volume in the pump chamber to counteract, for routine, say, hour-long or 4-hour-long power outages. Then often with these type of systems, we will actually add another factor of safety to that, and we'll add we won't put an automatic standby generator there, but we will put a disconnect switch in with a plug so that you can easily add a generator and run that system. That's a pretty short, that's pretty short money to invest when you're doing this kind of system. And if you have a multi-day power outage, you could keep that system running using that feature in the system. So
you said you could buy the generator. So would the implication be that this neighborhood would have to invest in a generator and maintain and store it and use it as necessary?
They would, or they'd have to rent one or something.
Is there any possible way to put those tanks anywhere else? Like, why is that where we want to put those tanks?
Well, it's a low point in the site. So of course, water flows downhill, so we have to capture it. And so all of those units down in that location would require pumping anyway. So there's going to be a pumping component to this system. Right,
but wouldn't you want to like minimize the pumping component? Believe me, I live in the hilliest neighborhood in the world, and everybody here has septic pumps, and our neighborhood is new, and they still constantly go off because there's issues all the time. So this, to me, is something I honestly think needs to be looked into in a little more depth and see if there's anything we can do to reduce the pumping, if at all possible. Because I think, saying that an entire neighborhood can get together and pitch in money and buy a generator and maintain it and hook it up in case of emergency is like, I don't know, that just seems bizarre to me.
Assuming they, if it's a homeowners association and they build it into the cost, I guess.
Right.
But also to your point of, for the abutter that's down by those pumps, I know they've, I think it's the Bethune and the Hoyt, they're very concerned of, what happens if there's problems where something isn't mitigated and it then flows into, their property. And, so it does have concern in general.
Yeah, I mean, it may sound a little odd, but it's actually very common for these systems. If this development was a few more units and it was a septic system that was over 2,000 gallons a day, Title V would actually require us to pressure dose that and pump it. So larger systems tend to be pumped just because of that reason. So it's pretty common to have pump systems, especially on these larger systems.
Yeah, well, I would like
we
to,
can certainly look into it.
I would like to see something put into the homeowners agreement or something of the condo agreement that provides for some kind of backup power system, because I can see this being a disaster.
Can I comment on some of this?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. So I've worked with E1 grinder pumps, which are the largest, probably positive displacement pumps in the country. What the studies have shown, when the power goes out, what's the surprise is you think people are going to use water like mad, but they can't get at their water because the wells are not going to supply the water because they're on electricity. So to think that, the power goes out for the pump, to pump the sewer, the power is going to go out to supply the water. So in what further studies have shown, when people lose that power for a prolonged period, they're not going to have heat either. They're going to seek alternative housing if the power is going to go out like in a major ice storm for multiple weeks. So
Or they install backup power for their unit and
Yeah, that's what
continue
I was
to
just
live.
gonna say.
yeah, but you know, like we just talked about, we're going to talk about backup power for the sewer because it was a concern for the wells. You know, these units and these sizes, I don't believe that they're going to install personal generators on a condo. That's not normal and customary. You know, when you have a large home and you're in a deserted area, then yeah, you get a Kohler unit that will power your entire house. I can't think of any units that come to mind right now where, you know, and we could actually even deed restrict it so somebody doesn't try to do something like that, because that's not the intent of this type of development. This development, people all kind of live together and do things. There's not a lot of land here for everybody to have their own generator, you know, and I don't want somebody to put in a generator and bother the neighbor when it goes off. It's the noise. It's not set up like that. Just the last comment that I'll make, and I'll look into it, is there is propane tanks on this plan. So to get a propane generator for the development for the sewer, if the board want to see that, I think that's a high possibility to do. Again, it would be a propane generator down near the 3 tanks, kind of in a fenced in area, because it would be above grade and we'd have some plantings around it. The other thing to note is there's another safety factor with pump systems when you deal with multifamily home is by law, it has to be a duplex pumping situation, which means there's 2 pumps in the hole or in the tank, I should say. So if one pump goes out, the other pump kicks on, and you get a kind of a fancy control box, which even alternates the pump. So one pump doesn't get used all the time. And that's all built into the switch control box that again will sit above grade for access so people can work on it if they need to. So there'll be a small little utility area if we do decide to go with the generator, if the board wants that, then we set up a little planting area with a fence around it with a control box so people can troubleshoot the pumps if need be, and it'll have a backup generator supplied with propane.
Yeah, I guess so. To the point of like, you're not expecting residents to put in their own personal generators with each property. I mean, the home sizes aren't, well, you talk about them, maybe people downsizing into these homes, they're not that small, you know, 2,500 square, you know, so people, you know, I don't have a big house, but I have a full generator here because when we do lose power, and if it's for days, you know, I don't have the luxury to, yeah, I'll go find a hotel for a week or something. So I have invested in a generator. So you may have people that want to put generators in to protect their livelihoods.
Again, these are condominiums, and the land around them is a joint land. So they don't really have a right to put in a generator.
Well, right, to that point that,
Yeah,
as you say, the condos, but that's something, you know, you be sure to put in there because otherwise I can see people wanting to put.
Yeah, no, I just, like I said, it doesn't go with the harmony of the neighborhood. If one person wants to put a generator in and the other person doesn't, and then he's going to listen to his neighbor's generator, they're not that size. It's not private. It's not meant to be a single family home, regardless of its size. It's meant to be a condominium with shared land and so on.
So there's 11 detached units.
It's Gavin Robin.
Yeah.
I mean, these, just to be clear though, like, I know you keep calling them condos, but like, these are decent sized homes.
Yeah,
These are not,
right.
yeah. I mean, this is a pretty average sized home. I would hesitate to call it a condo. Not disagreeing with the fact that, you know, I understand your perspective for thinking we maybe should deed restrict, although I don't know. If I were moving into something and saw, like, the first thing I was told when I moved to Bolton was buy a generator because everybody, you know, we constantly lose power and everything's on, you know, septic and wells and all that. So it is a really important consideration. So I think all said and done, if you could consider some situation where we could put something in for backup for the pump, I think that's
Yeah.
a good start.
I will consider it and look at it.
Yeah, no, that's, thank you.
Gerard,
for
can I comment?
Who's speaking?
This is Andy.
Certainly, Andy. Yep, always a welcome. to
I would just want to take us back to 2 months ago or so, when at least 2 ZBA members expressed an interest in having the applicant consider a reduction in the scope and configuration of this project.
Mhm.
And doing so would reduce the project density to be more in line with the other 40B projects in Bolton. It would minimize or eliminate certain wetlands buffer issues. It would minimize impermeable surface area, and it would appease some of the proximity concerns raised by the abutters,
Mhm.
especially those on South Bolton Road. And frankly, I'm very disappointed that the applicant has not addressed this inquiry at all. So I would like to hear further on why you feel like none of those concerns are valid enough to reconsider the scope and the configuration of the project. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Andy.
You want
Jim,
me
I
to-
do not have a response to that. If you wanted to, if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
no, I'll respond to that.
respond and-
When, I don't know what Andy's talking about the density comparing to what projects that are also 40B in town. You know, that way I can't speak on that comment, but I can speak from the beginning of time when we originally sat down with Mallard Lane, we were as high as 16 units. When you look at denitrifying and putting, you know, Title V standards to the property. So then we cut that back substantially down to 11, but we didn't start at 11. That was not our intent, you know? So we did consider, like I said, 4.5 years ago when I started this, there were more units here, and we're down to this now, four years later, 11 units. So, you know, to say I didn't consider it, I did consider it. Maybe that was prior to Andy being involved in it, I don't know. But when we originally established Mallard Lane, it was 16 units. So now we're down to 11. So, you know, so I was considerate of the impact and the density. So that's my side of the story.
So when we look at it again, what's in front of us from when it came in front of us, and there have been comments made during the public hearing, during site walks, or about the, you know, particularly as you get closer to the street, some of those units down there that get closer to existing abutters and whatnot, that, you know, there was questions, are those necessary for the build out of the project and whatnot. So I think that's where Andy's concern is, that comments made since we've opened the public hearing for this project, you know, not having a mindset of what you've done in the past, because we haven't all been involved. Well, we may be involved in the town for many more years than you've been working on this project to get to this point. We haven't all been purview to those discussions. So from that perspective, there was some talk about, you know, it seems like overdense down by the street side. So,
but if I could, Mr. Chairman, if you look at the 2 existing dwellings at the bottom, and then you look at the offsets from the existing dwellings to say unit 2, it seems like the same type of offset. I mean, that's, you know, from the abutters. I mean, we're not crowding anybody with the units, you know, meaning the abutters. I mean, if you look at the offsets of the actual structures, I don't have a scale and I can't scale that, but you know, I can tell you that if you look at the offsets between these 2 existing dwellings and that existing dwelling in unit 2, it's about the same proximity, you know, as far as it isn't like we're proposing half the distance in the neighborhood or something like that from the existing dwellings that we bought. And one of the things that I think Tillis and Roy and we sat down, it was very good. And when we, it was actually Seth's comment way back when we decided not to encroach on the zoning offset to the sideline. We're maintaining that 20 feet. That's very valuable as far as development goes, to be able to do that and help that maximizes the buffer to the abutters. I mean, those are the things we've been working on and working pretty hard at, you know, yeah, we're at 11 units now. We've got the infrastructure in place for the 11 units. And that's where we're at. I mean, so I don't know. I just find it a little offensive when people say I didn't care about it, and I do. Maybe it was earlier, and that's a good comment that you've made, Mr. Chairman. You know, because it's been a long time for me, but that's what we're setting out to do, is to maximize from our property line what the zoning is, and that's a 20-foot offset, and that's what's moved us around a bit, and that's what we're trying to achieve, is and not vary that.
One comment I would have is there any thought to, you know, let's just say those it seems like the 3 properties or the 3 houses that are closest to the road, that are closest to the abutters, is there any thought to, you know, either raising the square footage of some of the other dwellings to minimize, you know, to lose a couple of those, you know, to kind of keep so that you're losing density in the overall project, but maybe upping the square footage of the houses from a cost perspective?
What we looked at is the part that we looked at. What we tried to do is do more than the minimum. The minimum for affordable housing is 20%. So we're trying to do 25, and that's why we're trying to do the 3 units affordable, and that's what's keeping our count high to 11, so we can provide those units. And again, these units, I know people have complained about the size. When you look at them, they look like a big footprint. However, it's single-story living. And when you really look at that, and these are aged in place houses. So, and you're going to lose 400 square feet for a 2-car garage when you do the math. So the living area in these units is not what you look at. Like, these aren't going to be colonials with that footprint. These are aged in place housing. They're going to be deed restricted to a 2-bedroom, and they're going to be age restricted to 55 plus. So when you look at the number of buildings in that kind of sense, the density seems like a lot, but the actual use is not going to be what we're accustomed to, because of, you know, we don't have that many neighborhoods that I'm aware of that are age restricted and deed restricted and single story living. So I think that's where people might be losing, you know, or misunderstanding what I'm trying to present here, to diversify the housing stock in Bolton.
Valerie, I know last time we met, we had a conversation about how the deed restricting may potentially change down the line, because I think there was another development in town that originally was age restricted, and then they ended up eliminating that. Did you have any follow-up on that? Is that a real thing that happened? Or is that something that could potentially happen in the future? Like, what is the context there?
So I reached out to DHCD, and they have said that you cannot refuse children at affordable units, which is as you're referring to, what happened at the Regency at Bolton. So as far as marketing materials and all of that, the 3 affordable units will need to be open to children.
So, Val, when you say Regency, you're talking about Pondside?
Yeah, sorry, the Toll Brothers development.
Right. Mhm.
So that changes things a little bit then, right? Because if there's potentially kids going to be allowed in those units, that sort of changes the dynamic of the neighborhood, first of all, in my opinion, right? Because if you're looking to go into a, adult living community, whatever, expectation is you're probably not looking to move in with a bunch of families, would be my suspicion. But aside from that, how does that affect the bedroom piece? Can you still deed it, or would it still be deeded, I guess, as a 2-bedroom unit, but allow children? Does that question make sense? Because I know that there's like limits about how many kids you can have in bedrooms and all of that as well. So that would limit who could apply, I guess, right?
Right, yeah, so you could still deed restrict, but you would need to allow the children.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of
Is-
number of bedrooms, yeah.
Is that a new regulation? I thought that, over 55 was over 55, so.
So.
To
can I
my
speak on
knowledge,
that, Mr.
it's,
Chairman?
to my knowledge, it's been a policy of theirs. I did reach out recently and got that correspondence from DHCD, so it should be in the packets. I think it's, as they've said, it's a part of, fair housing laws.
So in that packet, Valerie, when I read that, I mean, maybe it's, I don't know if it's any 40B. They specifically were talking about a LIP process. Does it matter whether it's a LIP or 40B on their distinction?
I believe not. It was in the actual email from Rieko said that we would not be able to restrict children at affordable units. So that's my impression.
Great. And how about Joe Pesnola? Do you have any input on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, there's a couple things at play here.
Mhm.
First is the age restriction. The age restriction is for it is allowed under federal anti-discrimination laws to age restrict. There is a provision within the federal statute that says it could only be applied to 80% of the units, and that provision is never enforced on normal age restricted projects. Where you get into trouble is the microscope that you're under on the on administering the affordable units and the adherence to the Federal Fair Housing Act for the distribution of those affordable units. So you need to have a lottery. And if a lottery person meets the criteria for the age restriction, which is one owner has to be 55,
right,
and they happen to also have children, then you cannot turn them away. And that's it. Is it going to happen? Don't know.
Right.
The issue here is the additional issue with regards to occupancy is the public water supply.
Right.
And the restriction that the state puts in that the culmination of the 11 single wells on a single property cannot serve more than 25 persons that reside at the property for more than 60 days out of the year. And the applicant's position on that is to deed restrict the bedroom count to no more than 2, regardless of what the internal configuration of the house is. That's a little bit confusing when you then add to that the age restriction, and whether in normal policy of DEP is to apply 2 persons per bedroom. So here 11 times 2 is more than 25. But the age restriction allows them to apply a different number of people per bedroom. At the end of the day, the applicant, the jurisdiction on the public water supply falls with DEP. And there is a process. DEP has implemented a policy, an internal policy in 2017 to take applications or requests for determination of whether a project constitutes a public water supply. And this project will have to go through that process to, as I'm sure the Board of Health will want and already has commented to this board that they want input from DEP. Well, DEP has a process for that input, and the applicant has to go do that. Does he have to go do that during this comprehensive permits process? No, he doesn't, because the jurisdiction lies outside of local rules and within the state regulations and policies administered by the DEP drinking water people, and they'll take that up. What's important to note is if the DEP ultimately says that based on the fact that this is age restricted and it's got a deed restriction, but it's got an affordability component and there's potential for there to be more than two people per unit, that this is a public water supply, this is a very different project, because the implication of a public water supply is that they need to permit the public water supply through the state, and they need to have a dedicated area around the well or wells that has nothing in it except well and well related items.
Right.
And that zone, what they call a zone 1, could be as large as a 133-foot radius. So it starts to materially impact the placement of units, placement of roadways, infrastructure, septic systems, all of those things. And it's a very different project that probably drives the unit count down to then not having 25 people. So it's kind of a back and forth. But it's the applicant's position that he's in a good solid position with regards to the application of DEP regulation and policy, that this project does not constitute a public water supply, and that he should be allowed to go through this board in this process based on that. And I concur with that because, again, the regulatory jurisdiction lies with the state and not the local rules.
So there wouldn't be a risk to us as a board to, if we go through this process, if it were to be permitted, if the applicant then runs into a problem with DEP, it's DEP and the applicant have to fix it. It doesn't come back to the board, or does it?
Well, I mean, the applicant and DEP and the Board of Health have to fix it. And if there are changes to the plan, then there is a process under the 40B regulation for that change to come back to the board if it's post-permit issuance. And this board is required to determine whether that change is substantial or insubstantial. If the board determines that it's insubstantial, it's approved as presented. If the board determines it's substantial, then within the next 30 days following the request, the board has to set up a public hearing and run through the public hearing process to consider the modifications to the comprehensive permit and issue a modified comprehensive permit.
Right. So, okay. Any other questions on this topic? Because we did sort of cut into Mr. Roy's time, but if he had any other items he wanted to continue reviewing on the new plans, that would be good.
That's quite all right, Mr. Chair. I was pretty much done. I wanted to give you the overview there. Like I said, there was a detailed peer review response and a lot of, if you need to go to sleep later, you maybe print it off and take it with you to bed and read through it. I expect that we'll be receiving, or maybe we have, I wanted to ask this question. I have not seen a response to our response from the peer review. Has there been a second peer review letter generated, or I'm assuming we're expecting one if there hasn't been one already?
I have not seen one. I mean,
Okay.
some of these materials were just recently provided to us from the board to review, so.
Okay.
uh,
So I would expect that there'd be another peer review response to our back to us, either agreeing with us or on an item or two. I'll be optimistic. Disagreeing, we'll need to, address some other engineering related issues. Yeah, I guess I wanted to leave it at that. I figured that the board would have questions, so I wanted to be sort of give an overview of things and not get into the nitty gritty, but I'm happy to if the board wants to, but it's just, there are more
can you-
issues related to that engineers like talking about, so.
Can you show the area that I think part of maybe at the cul-de-sac, did that change in response to the fire department? I know I saw a letter in the package regarding some material, subsurface material to use so that the fire department could back up over land versus having some turnout if that was correct, or is this new configuration, or maybe it's the same? Does that address the fire department's concerns?
I think we still owe you, the fire department, your board and the fire department, a turning exhibit to document that the Bolton's emergency apparatus can maneuver that cul-de-sac, but we did do some tweaks to that geometry. So I think, but I don't think we've closed the loop on that, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to, we still need to provide some documentation on the turning exhibit. If I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think we still owe that.
One of the things that we talked about, I guess, there's a kind of a grass grid that would go through the center that if they could drive right on top of it and we could still have grass grow. One of the comments when we started this project, they didn't want any grass there so they could maneuver their apparatuses around. And then, some of the feedback we got through the site visit and all that, I think Valerie reapproached the fire department to try to get some grass in there. And I believe they gave us a stipulation if we put it's like a geogrid or a grass tile or grass pavers, I think they called, in there, then we could have grass grow in the center and then they can just drive right through there and they won't get stuck. They're especially designed for emergency apparatus, these grass pavers.
Okay, so as long, I know I saw something recent, I don't know if that was something that Valerie, have you sent that over to the applicant, or is that something that they responded to? Have that chance to respond?
The fire product, that was shared with the applicant. That was coming directly from the fire chief.
Okay.
I think that needs a little more thought on so point noted there, I appreciate that. And we'll, among other things,
Okay.
huddle with the applicant to address that.
Okay.
So I don't have anything else, Mr. Chair. Like I said, I anticipate probably one more round of tweaks. Certainly, there's a few things we need to tweak as presented tonight, such as the detail we just suggested, and probably a few additional things if we get them back from the peer review consultant. So this isn't the last bite at the apple, so to speak. We'll probably be back before you in a future meeting to present those.
Yeah. To that point about the apple, getting bitten. So time-wise, Joe, we had a missed meeting because we had to continue because we didn't have materials presented to us. Are we backing up to our deadline time for like the 180 days?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Is it
The
February?
180 days. The 180 days is due is up in February. So I'm still seeing a lot of work to be done here.
Right. We still haven't just got new plans. We need new letters, review letters. We haven't had the full list of the waivers yet. All those things that have to get reviewed and then even have meetings on. So
right. No, the the waiver list that was submitted was only from the zoning bylaw. What we've heard tonight is
Mhm.
that the applicant is considering waivers from the local wetlands bylaw that they'd like to speak to the Conservation Commission regarding, so there's time before we can see that. There was a mention of waivers from Board of Health regulations with regard to the septic systems and the wells. And I think it behooves the applicant to get at least a draft list of waivers before this board
Mhm.
of everything, all the relief that's being requested as soon as possible. Even if it's a draft, it's as you know, the waiver list is something that moves and changes with the project as the project changes. But it's important for the board to understand the extent of relief that's being sought,
Mhm.
so that you can review the project and engage the peer review that you need to consider those aspects.
Right, and those usually take, from past experience, at least one or more, maybe a second meeting. I mean, not that the meetings always have to get scheduled month and apart, particularly if we're trying to wrap things up in some respect to get toward a decision, but I would think that at some point we're going to need to entertain with the applicant a agreement to extend the hearing date from the 180 days to something other than that, whether it's a month more or 2 months more.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we're at that point where
Mhm.
the February 4th, 2022 is the 180 days. So if this board chooses to continue for a month, the continuance is gonna put you past that date. I do have a couple other issues, Mr. Chairman. I do apologize for the tardiness in my letter that was issued today, but I was in contact with DEP to help the board understand the public water supply issue in getting that initial feedback and understanding their 2017 internal policy for review of determination of public water supplies and all of that, and working with Valerie over the last couple of weeks. But I have not seen a formal response to my initial correspondence, so I would ask that the applicant get a copy of this latest correspondence and respond to it formally. But I can run through a few things on that.
Yeah,
The
because
issue of
in my notes, you had some information regarding public water supply, minimum information, DEP drinking water matrix, standard operating policy terms. I think a whole host of DEP related items that you were able to research.
Yeah, that's in relation to this 2017 policy for determination of whether a project requires a public water supply. So that's merely that was passed on to me from DEP, from Tim O'Keefe at Central Region, who's their drinking water guy, who covers Bolton, and that can be passed on to the applicant to understand. Maybe Tim already knows. He's worked in this arena, so maybe he understands that policy and is moving towards that. So I think, again, my final point on the public water supply is that I do believe it's outside the purview of this board, and it's up to the applicant whether or not how he proceeds from there, or whether he rests on his position that it's not a public water supply, and he will deal with the Board of Health and the well permits for the individual permits once the comprehensive permit is issued, containing the waivers and the relief from the well requirements. Just to highlight some of the points that are still outstanding that should be addressed. As far as Northeast Classic Builders LLC, a check of the Secretary of State's office still sees that entity dissolved. So I think the applicant needs to resolve that. I thought that that was stated prior that that was being resolved with the Secretary of State's office. I don't know if there's paperwork that can be forwarded to the board to prove that that the entity exists and that it's in good standing, and that entity is before this board as an applicant. With regards to the architectural plans, there were some refinements to the architectural renderings that were presented, but they still do not comply with the regulations. They need to be prepared by a registered architect. There's no indication on the plans that the registered architect has done these plans. There's no dimensions on the plans to understand how they relate to the dimensions on the site plan. There are 2 floor plans that are issued and some indications of what units those are. The site plan shows 3 30 by 60 units, 1 40 by 60, and the balance 50 by 60 in their rectangular boxes. The architectural renderings that were presented have articulations in them and porches, and they just still don't look like what's on the site plan. So I think that that's an open issue that needs to be rectified, both in compliance with the regulations, in having a registered architect's set of floor plans that can be reviewed by your peer reviewer to make sure that they jive with what's being presented on the site plan. So the balance of my letter, really the meat was going through the drinking water stuff, and the board can look at that, applicant can look at that and comment in the future. Again, I apologize for the hardiness of the letter, but wanted to get it before the board tonight.
Well,
That's all I had.
Yeah. So Joe, in your professional opinion, because involved with these processes a lot, the 40Bs, are we looking at probably maybe like a 90 day request for an extension, or how?
Mr. Chairman, yeah,
depends on how fast we get the information.
If we work backwards from how we see these projects end as far as the process, and we look at the final meeting is cleaning up loose ends, reviewing draft decisions, deliberating on the waiver requests within the public hearing process. To get to that, you need a draft decision. You're not drafting a decision until all the peer review is done, a final list of waivers is done, and before the board, and you've been able to digest your peer review input from the neighbors and input from the board to begin to formulate conditions of approval with regards to how you feel. If you're inclined to approve the project, it needs to be properly conditioned to mitigate the adverse impacts. So there's 2 meetings right there that are just in doing those things. So if we then work backwards and say the next, or we work from the next meeting, say the February meeting, in which your peer reviewers are both present, Maureen from Norse Environmental's there, Greg's there, so that there can be some discourse between the peer review people. So that's the February meeting. Something's going to come out of that needs cleanup and continuation. So in my mind, there's at least 4 meetings left. So that's where the February 4th is your 180 days. Yeah, you need 90 days more at minimum to get this project where it needs to go, where you have shown that in your diligence that you've gone through this process multiple times, and have a track record for doing it in a manner that, you're not deviating from.
Right, yeah, right. And we lost time, I mean, admittedly, with the, granting the continuance to this meeting from the last meeting, because we didn't have materials timely submitted to us. So, I want to work with the applicant, but I was looking at, we're looking at probably a 60 days, but looking at some of the materials tonight, and then, having to go back to peer reviewers and things like that, then and we haven't got waivers and whatnot, that, 90 days seems reasonable, but I guess we need to have the applicants buy-in on that as well.
You do. You need the applicant's assent. So you make a request, and the applicant can put it in writing and assent to it, or he can refuse.
Mhm.
And then the board needs to close the hearing by February 4th.
Right, absent a continuation and an assent to continue the process, right, we'd have to close it, but then that could be a different decision process on that if we have, outstanding materials that we don't believe we can then make a decision on.
Certainly.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll speak on the continuance. Yes.
Uh-huh.
I had one question before I talk. So like Greg was asking, are we going to get another peer review from Horsley and Witten? Do we know how that stands?
I would presume that they will review the new materials. I mean, these came in, it looks like the information with the new letters and revised set of plans were, December or around that time. My understanding from our contract with Horsley Witten, generally they need at least, is it 2 to 3 weeks, Valerie, to obtain and review things, so they can then review, document, and then get back to us and or the applicant as well. But so if they were receiving these things contemporaneously in early December, holidays, whatnot, they're probably working on review, responding to those presently, but I can't speak for them at the moment. They weren't available for tonight.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were trying to fast track the wetlands comments, just so that we have that for tonight. And I think they also weren't sure about how a few other comments were going to kind of shake out. And so I think they were trying to be also economical with the applicant's time, as the plan changes weren't as weren't as comprehensive as I think that we may have thought. So I don't know that they necessarily felt like I think they were looking for a few more answers from the ZBA. It's a little bit more guideline of what kinds of questions you might want to have answered. But they should be able to provide a second full peer review letter prior to our next public hearing.
Okay.
I mean,
And Jim, when do you think you'd have a list of, like, whether it's draft, as Joe said, where you put together all the waivers that you think you're now going to need, given that this is going to be the site layout?
Right. No, I could have addressed, working with Greg. I don't know what Greg's availability is, but I would say 1 week from tonight. I mean, because most of them we've discussed at hand between, Dilson, Roy, and myself. We've discussed them all. And so I think we could put a draft list together pretty quickly, within 7 days.
I mean,
I think that's fair. Maybe by the end of next week. Yeah.
So that would then, as I say, we're already into the almost middle of January, so we would need to get those. So as I say, the minimum, we have another comprehensive permit meeting next week. So it wouldn't be feasible for us to even continue that close to in time perspective. But if we're looking at an early February meeting to continue this hearing to, we would need to know that there's materials that are going to be coming, so we have time to look at them and, you know, facilitate getting to other boards if they require their input, so that, you know, we want to use the time wisely, but, you know, say, we know we're backing up against the sort of statutory requirement of hearing the 40B, you know, so.
Right, I mean, you know, I think it would be possible for us, for me as the applicant. Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to give a 90-day extension, but I would definitely entertain a 60-day with some kind of promise from Horsley and Witten that they get us the information. You know, I don't perceive that they would give us more work to do or more things to do than they already did. I would think the list would shorten up somewhat.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? Is that you.
Right. Well, I mean, it just, I mean, unless the guard over there really changed and they got a bunch of new employees and they're taking a whole different look at the thing, then yeah, I think we're gonna, on the second go around, we'll be looking at a shorter list. And I think, you know, Greg's office did a wonderful job on meeting their other list pretty timely. So I think, you know, we can get a, you know, I think we should be able to get, you know, get it all done in a 60-day extension. So that's what I'm comfortable doing, you know.
All right, so, well, so.
Can we talk about what we still need to make sure we could hit, you know, again, 60 days, right? Because there's things that we're gonna need in
Right. And to that
beyond
point,
the waivers, right?
Right, to that point, Brian, so I'm saying even for Joe's input too. So if the applicant currently is saying, yep, you know, he's flexible or willing to address a 60-day, I mean, there's always the, you know, we get to the next hearing, we're working into that 60-day extension, and we can assess it as we're working through this. And, you know, it may come clear that, you know, it's going to need another 30 days. And, you know, and then we ask the applicant to continue 30 days. We're not looking, I mean, from my perspective, managing the board and working with the, none of us want to do this for, you know, any of these applications and make it a lifetime job, right? We want to get them done, meet our requirement from the board and from the town and from the statutory, you know, and make a decision. But we have to be able to make the decision based on good information, final reviews. As Joe said, we have to craft a draft decision so that we have an idea, even that type of decision is going to be honored by the applicant as well as pass the test council and things like that. So all that just tends to eat time, you know. So I'm not looking to say, you know, we're definitely going to just extend this, you know, without parameters, but, you know, maybe we start with 60 days and just be open that if the process doesn't speed up like we anticipate, then there could be a chance that we'd have to ask for another 30 days. We're not looking to do that, but that I'm just, you know, I look at Joe's professional guidance. He's been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it a long time in town for the town of Bolton. And I know the wrap up time, like on large projects, goes slower, even though you're doing a lot of work sometimes than you anticipate.
Mr. Chairman, I think Valerie and I can talk to Horsley Witten and they should be able to get the board's not looking for any additional input at this time from them other than to respond to the 2 letters that were presented from Craig Roy and Norse Environmental. I think that can be done in fairly short order so that then that gives the applicant time between now and the next meeting to respond to the responses. And if anything, if there's additional information that need come out of that, then that'll be hopefully time to do that. I believe the board should request architectural plans that dimensioned architectural plans from an architect that represent what the applicant wants to build. If it be 3 styles, then 3 floor plans, so that so that we fully understand what that is, and that's cross-referenced to the site plan, and any updates to the site plan are made so that the site plan is representative of what he wants to build. I think the list of waivers is critical, and that it's comprehensive and covers everything that this current plan does not meet with regards to zoning, local wetlands bylaw, Board of Health regulations for the septic system, and Board of Health regulations for the well, and enumerated exactly how those local requirements are not met. So that can be passed to the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health if he wants to go and meet with those boards individually to try to accelerate and explain and facilitate input from those boards. That's fine, but the board needs that information. And I think the applicant needs to resolve the question on the standing with the Secretary of State's office with regard to the entity that's before the board as applicant.
Right. So
It's Gavin Robinson from 328 South Bolton Road. I think we also had a question about a landscape plan too. I don't know if that was still outstanding.
Yeah, I believe a landscape plan has not been included, and it is a regulatory requirement. So landscape plan needs to be submitted to fulfill the regulatory requirement.
I believe there was some landscape plans submitted. And there was rendering submitted. I actually brought a landscape plan planting to the design review board, then submitted it to Valerie, and it was on the plans. Did anybody see that? We talked
I
about the
don't
screening.
recall anything from the design review board, but
Valerie, do you want to talk on that? Do you remember seeing anything?
I think perhaps it just wasn't a classic landscape plan that members are familiar with seeing. Greg, I'm going to stop your screen sharing just to show
Oh, sure. Yeah.
what
I was done anyway.
okay, what Jim was referring to. Just a moment. It was, I believe, the sample plantings.
right.
Again, I'm sorry, my computer does not like the internet these days, so it's going to be a little bit slow to scroll all the way down. I believe this is what the applicant is referring to with the landscape plan.
Yeah, it was going to be a tree-lined street, and some of Horsley and Witten's comments, they actually had Greg Roy's office go in and put that into the stormwater calcs. So that's an autumn blaze that, so the tree-lined, the road would be tree-lined, and then there's sample buffers in different areas that we were trying to address some of the abutters concerns in the different areas. That's one sample on 3 and 4. 3 would be behind unit 11 as a screening, and then 4, that sample 4 would be behind unit 1 to buffer that. And then there's another sample, if Valerie, if you could just go up, I think.
So I think that what the board though is looking for is sheets on guidance referring to installation of trees, locations of trees on plans,
The trees,
just a little bit more of a robust landscaping plan.
There are trees on one of the more recent plans submitted, but I would suggest that the applicant go back and cross-reference that against the utilities, because I did notice that some of the trees are located on top of wellheads, which is obviously not going to be effective. So with that in mind, I think having a more formal integrated plan with the plantings and it would be useful for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I did submit some ideas and I brought these through the zoning review board and then I forwarded them to the ZBA. So that's what I was planning to do, and I know Horsley Witten did see the plants because they commented on adding the tree-lined streets to the stormwater calcs. Because it affects the stormwater.
This is Greg. May I add to this discussion briefly?
Sure.
We do have a landscape plan in the most recent package, site plan set at sheet C6. But point noted by the one of the previous speakers, we'll certainly go through and cross-reference, make sure we have things correlated with the other underlying utilities and other sheets of things. And we'll work with the applicant to make sure that we have that. We'll work with the applicant on that. On that plan to make sure that the board has what they need to make their determination.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah,
I would think that before we make a decision on what, or before we ask how long to push the hearing out, that we get an answer or we get a better understanding of when we might receive, the plans that Joe, talked about, the full list of waivers, the information on the business entity, and I guess, tying into the plans would be the landscape plans. I think from there, knowing when we would have that and knowing when we might need to, have back and forth on any of those is going to really determine how long we need to make decisions.
right. The only to that point, Brian, and I think Joe would agree, because February 4th is 2.5 weeks away, maybe 3 weeks away. If we were to continue the hearing tonight to another meeting, say we say, okay, we're gonna do it on February 3rd. Next day, we'd have to potentially either close or continue it or have that letter in hand. So we're looking at least probably a 60-day
Right.
minimum extension from the February 4th date, not from tonight, from the February 4th date. And then as we work into finding the information you're looking for, is like, what are the real deadlines where we think we'll have this information? We may have to, at that point, say, maybe we have to add another 30 days at that point. But I think for tonight, we should at least probably think about having some agreement that we'll get a 60-day extension from February 4th.
Okay.
Is that reasonable, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm. So what do you think about that, Jim, Mr. Moran?
I think that's fine. I think that's the way to move it forward, like everybody's got a job to do. And I think that makes most sense to move it forward,
Okay, so you'll prepare a letter to Valerie noting that you'll authorize a minimum 60-day extension from February 4th. And, and if there's any caveat language in there, should we not get the information we need, or if there's any backup on, your resources, that if it has to get extended again, we'll deal with it at that time, But our intent is to move the process along, properly, but, we have, Joe's not gonna let us, skip steps, which he shouldn't, and we don't want to, so.
No, like I said earlier, I think everybody's got a job to do and we'll all do the job and move it along.
Okay, so we'll anticipate getting that letter, but in the interim, should we do we think we'll have information where we can schedule a meeting before either the February 4th date, or should we just schedule it, a month out from now, knowing we're going to get that extension letter, and maybe do it the second week of February, depending on the board's availability. Valerie, can you look at schedules and see, what your schedule is around early February? If, because you have other meetings that you facilitate.
Yeah, let me just take a look.
Mhm.
So I have evening meetings on the 7th and the 9th. So we could make it a full week and go for the 8th, or we could do the week before.
So the 8th would be a what day?
That's a Wednesday. And then the week before, February 1st is a Tuesday. The 2nd is the Wednesday.
Mhm.
Oh,
February 8th is a Tuesday,
February 8th is Tuesday, yeah.
but I would ideally not like to do that date. That's my
I'm not
daughter's
available that
birthday.
date either.
Okay,
Got plans.
all right, so, so how about the week before? Does anyone have any concerns on either the 2nd or the 3rd, first or the 2nd?
I could do the 1st, Tuesday the 1st.
That's fine for me too.
Andy, Brad?
As far as I know, that works for me, but we'll,
Right,
let's book it.
yeah, well, we'd have to.
Fine with me.
Okay, so why don't we entertain a motion to continue to Tuesday, February 1st, and would people want to do it at 6 o'clock or 6:30?
I vote for 6.
6, okay.
I think the earlier the better. Yeah,
Okay.
like 6.
All right,
I just also want to, someone had a hand up at one point. I just want to make sure before we continue that there are no questions out there.
yeah, I haven't seen any hands up lately, but,
Maybe it was a mistake.
right, no. And I know that, I believe, like, I referred to, like, we did get a letter from the Bethune's Hoyt family at 342 South Main, South Bolton Road, outlining concerns of drainage, sewage, site plans, house sizes, landscaping, the project execute, all these items that sort of, we touched a little bit on all of them today, but I want to be sure that that letter gets to the applicant and to the peer review so that, I think it's all relative to what we're talking about. So we want a motion to continue the hearing to February 1st at 6 p.m.
I would make a motion. We continue this hearing till February 1st at 6 p.m.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right.
Those in favor, Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes,
Gerard Ahern,
Yes,
and Elizabeth Hutchins.
Yes.
all right, so we'll continue this till February 1st at 6 p.m. and we got a lot of work to get done between now and then. On the applicant's part, we're going to solicit closely written and make sure everyone's moving at appropriate speed, and we'll just work toward some tight deadline at the end.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the time this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Roy. Bye. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, so we have one other piece of business. It's not a hearing, it's a sort of business item. We had a representative from 711 to 713 Main Street, Mr. Tim Hess. He's from Studio Institute Architects, I believe, and he had some ideas or he wanted to hold a conceptual discussion regarding some proposed renovations on that those properties. So Valerie wanted to put him on the board on the calendar for tonight, so we can maybe spend 15 minutes or so, and then we'll see what Mr. Hess has in mind, and we'll go from there.
Great,
Too long.
Great. Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for making a little space for us this evening, and also members of the board. Thank you. And Valerie for helping us be here tonight. My name is Tim Hess. I'm an architect with Studio and C2 Architects, and I'm here with my client, Craig Bovaird, tonight. Craig, maybe wave just to make sure everybody knows.
Hi, everybody.
You.
Hi, Craig.
Awesome. So I know we've just sort of been a fly on the wall for the last little bit, so we know you had a long couple of hearings, and we don't want to take up much time. But we do want to just give you a very quick overview and a look, kind of conceptual description of what we've got in mind. The parcel that Craig has recently purchased, something like just 6 or 8 weeks ago, huh, Craig? Is in the center of the town center, directly adjacent to the new town common. The street address is 711 and 713. I imagine you may be familiar with it. It's a pretty conspicuous spot in town. The parcel is about 1/4 acre. There are 3 buildings on it now. Our understanding is that there's the house closest to the corner was built about 1839. Within a year or two after that, an adjacent building was built as a tailor shop and was in use through, I'm really not sure how recently, certainly through, I'm just going to guess the 90s, as most recently antique shop, but has really been nothing but commercial, was never a residence at all. And at the heart of our, what we imagine is going to be in question with this board is our interest in using that little blue building for a non-residential use. It's our intent to put an interior design business in that building. This would be a small professional practice with employees numbering in the single digits. Craig, I think Stephanie's got a staff of 3. Is that right?
She's got 1 4 days a week and an intern right now.
There
And
you go.
herself. And herself.
Andy Samoylov.
Sorry.
So certainly a small scale professional office. There are, the kind of broad, the broad long-term thinking has included some more diffuse, and by that I mean just sort of less certain, less resolved ideas about some sort of use that would support, sort of help financially support the renovation of the barn, restoration of the barn, which is, we view as a really central and kind of critical, beautiful, essential component of the property and the project. I think time-wise, that may be a phase 2 kind of thing, maybe, a year, 3, even 5 years out, not really certain. But we know we're in the historic district. We know that we've already begun, at least at a kind of introductory level, some conversations with the folks on that commission. We attended a Conservation Commission meeting last week. Certainly, those of you familiar with the parcel will know Great Brook bisects the parcel, passes within and beneath the floors of the barn, and with sort of through the foundation. We're adjacent to some replicated wetlands that were produced as a product of the kind of a byproduct of the town common. So we recognize that we've got a parcel and a project with a number of kind of constituencies and jurisdictions, and certainly we're not here with an application or a specific ask of you tonight, but I believe it's our understanding that the kind of threshold issue will be permission, whether it's, I'm not expert enough yet, familiar enough yet with how your bylaws laid out to know whether it would be a special permit or a variance or perhaps some other mechanism more appropriate. But we need some mechanism by which to put the business use in that blue building.
Because I think we went through this property years back, even I think to that first building that's abuts the town common that has the
Candle shop and
candle company, things like that. At that point, there was workaround because there was a former owner of the property, and I don't know how many times, if it's just changed yet, but I recall it was a woman, I believe she was from the Stowe area, but working on what could be done on those properties. And I believe at least for that one building, I can have to go back in history and maybe Valerie can look to see, but I believe they did a special permit to be able to get that structure permitted the way it is for its current use. So, but we're here to listen and to see what your ideas are, but certainly, if you've got Valerie's here, you've got the right person to sort of help guide you into maybe what you need to formally do to, envision, what you're envisioning to actually make it, a reality.
Yep.
Yeah, I would comment. I'd like to see the reuse of those buildings. I think they certainly something I would hope to work out. Question is, what condition is the septic system in for that building? I know if you're going to put people in there, the building across the street, which was the old Cracker Barrel, has a tight tank, and I'm not sure where you are on that type of thing with Board of Health. But anyway, just a question.
Tim, I can answer that. This is Craig. Before I purchased the property, I had Neshoba Valley, spoke to the Neshoba Valley Water District,
Associated Boards of Health.
Yeah, and we actually had it tested. It passed the Title V, and it's rated at, I think it's 550 gallons. And I'm not sure the rate, if that's per day or per hour or whatever, but we're not intending residential. There is one residential apartment there in the gray building, but the other uses, we're not looking at residential, and it should be low impact on the septic. We anticipate.
Good. Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Thank you.
So, any other questions from the board? I'm encouraged that someone wants to, as residents, use those properties. They painted them, which was nice. At least they got a little better look to them. But at some point, to have them actually have some vitality to them would be nice.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see them put to good use. Yeah.
Right. So it'd be great if you could do something. But certainly you have to, as they say, follow the map of what the guidelines are for the town, the bylaws, and if there's some form of variance or special permit needed, we're the right board for it, and we're pretty open-minded board, and reasonable to work with. So
I can tell you we're very excited about the project and committed to following the proper protocols and processes, and really making this something nice for us and the town. So
great.
That's the objective.
Well, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. So we went down this road we've done with other people that come in with sort of business meetings. They have ideas. I think I've always was cautioned when I first got involved with the board that our board is, we make decisions on, whether it be an application, as a ad hoc application. We're not like sort of an advisory board where we can sort of guide you or steer you down the process. But we'll listen on, informal meetings like this, but at some point when you have to, make an application, then we deal with the facts and circumstances. We can't sort of coach you to, oh no, you got to do it this way. I mean, that's,
Weren't there last time we looked at this property, weren't there some issues of having a lack of parking on site for the use of both buildings to be?
I think for what the former owner, what the person wanted to do, right, there was site parking issues that, and that's one of the areas where they wanted us to design it, us to come up with a fix. And it was like, well, we can't fix, you have to, make it work within whatever you're trying to do, right? The town has, so yes, there were site parking, how people could either get on the road or off the road and things like that. But, it's a challenge because where it is and it's tight, but nonetheless, depending on what they're doing, if it's low use and, I mean, yeah, they may be able to make it work.
Well, thanks. It seems like maybe there's no more questions, but I expect we'll see more of you in the near future. And I think we're encouraged already just by the little bits of feedback we've heard here tonight. We really think it's a pretty exciting opportunity there. And the new town common seems to be
Taking
just
off.
so inviting and
Right, yeah. I mean, it
helps
things
to really.
from being a town resident 20 plus 25 years or so, see that town common sort of start to have a heartbeat to it, and see farmers markets there, and to see kids sledding on the incline over this past week when we had some snow, and to see people doing things. So yes, if you could develop those properties within the the town's guidance and make it work for you and for the owner, yeah, it's going to be it's a nice area of town that is inviting.
I remember
It's
when
kind
there was
of
an
the
antique
nature of-
shop there. So I would, every time I drive by there, I think of the antique shop and think to myself, they got to put something back in there.
Yeah. It's kind of the nature of the zoning bylaws there. It's just really, really hard to have a bylaw which on its face is, it's kind of directly applicable to the town and the building stock and the parcels that we have. It's sort of, in New England where we were built out, 200 years ago, 150 years ago, and zoning's been in place for more like 2 generations, and boards like your zoning board and planning boards and others sort of exist to recognize that, sometimes the bylaw on its face is not a great fit for every single parcel, but it's in spending a little time with the master plan, which, we understand is kind of being updated. It's easier to find aspects and statements and aspirations and goals and visions in the master plan, which seem really kind of clearly in line with where we're headed. So we're encouraged by that kind of vision.
And there are provisions for variances and special permits and whatnot, in our bylaws. So you just have to see which works, which is what is required for your project, and then follow the documents, and we'll go from there.
It's great.
Mhm.
Well, thanks again so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for waiting through the other hearings. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good night and good luck.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So with that, I guess we don't have minutes to review. We'll do that the next time we have a hearing, potentially, because we're getting pressure now, Valerie, from Pam Powell to get our minutes up. Not us particularly, but all boards. They're saying we need to get them up faster. So
Yeah, I was thinking the holidays were going to be slow. They weren't.
we're not. Right. So, right. So we just have a motion to adjourn then.
So motioned.
All right. Seconded there.
Second.
All right, Brian. Thanks.
And in favor, Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Gerard Ahern,
Yes.
Gabriella Mano,
Yes.
Right.
and Elizabeth Hutchins.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. It's a longer night than we anticipated, but threw a couple extra things on top of our regular meeting, so appreciate your time.
Great.
See you next week.
Next week. 2 weeks,
Stay
whatever
warm.
that is. All right. See
Take
ya.
care.
Yep.
Some skating, Brian.
Yep.
Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Likewise.